Okay, Be'ezras Hashem, let us begin the daf today. Today's daf is Masechta Bava Metzia Daf Tzadik, and we're going to be starting from daf Pei Tes 89b to the last line Taner Rabbanim. So let's just review. We're talking about this lav. The Torah says Loisachsem Shor. You're not allowed to muzzle an ox b'dishoy while it's threshing. Now, usually when you're threshing, the wheat underneath is not chayiv and trumas or. It's only after the threshing, when you make it into a pile and then you smooth it out, then it becomes chayiv and trumas or. But up until that is not the gemar malacha. So the Torah specifically says that before the tvua is chayiv and trumas the wheat is chayiv and trumas and when the ox is working with that truma. For example, it's threshing, then you're not allowed to muzzle the ox. So now comes a bunch of questions like this. Taner Rabbanim. This is what the Gemara is dealing with. Horos, a cow, hamasraksos betvua, that is treading on tvua. Now, Rashi explains that we're dealing with truma with wheat that was already, or barley that was already chayiv and trumas amaisros. So why are you treading on it? Because it dried out, it's dry, and you want to remove the peel. It's a certain way to make it more edible, but it was already chayiv and trumas amaisros. So therefore, when the cow is working with such type of tvua, there would be no isser to muzzle the cow. That's what the Bryce is going to say. There would be no isser to muzzle the cow in this situation because this tvua was already chayiv and trumas amaisros. Furthermore, we go to Tzadik Amar Aleph. Let's say the cow is threshing actual truma or actual meiser. Now, how's that possible? Usually, truma meiser is after the threshing. You give off truma meiser after the threshing. It's talking about where the kohen showed up. The kohen showed up to the field, so you set off trumas and meisers right then and there. So, because of that, therefore, this tvua that it's threshing is not really edible for the cow. She's really not supposed to eat it. So therefore, because it has to be treated with holiness, right? So therefore, if you would muzzle your animal, then you will not violate the Isra Bal Tachsim because that's a good time to muzzle your animal. But so now you have an animal that's threshing. Hi, Lewis, we just began. We're in Tzadik Amar Aleph. Now you have an animal that's threshing, and you're muzzling the animal, but you're allowed to muzzle the animal. But people who see it from the outside will be nervous. Oh, you're over the Isra of muzzling your animal. So va'avo mipnei maris ayin. For onlookers, what you should do is maybe bul ma'oise hamin. You should bring a fistful of, let's say, of whatever he's working with, whatever the cow is working with. Let's say it's working with barley. V'toilelo betraskolin shebefia, and you hang it. You put a little barley in the basket that's around its neck, next to its mouth. So even though it's muzzled, it looks like it can eat if it wants. So people don't think that you're over the lava of muzzling your animal. So you do something that to ward off the onlookers from thinking you're over the Isra Bal Tachsim, but really you're allowed to. Comes along Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Rab Shimon ben Yochai says, maybe kashinim v'toilelo. You bring vetch, which is a type of animal food, and you tie it and you put it by that basket. Shakafinin yafillah min hakov. Because vetch, that animal food is better for her than the food that it's working with, the produce that it's working with. So it's working with barley, that's not as good as karshinim. So Rab Shimon ben Yochai just says, instead of putting barley, let's say, by the basket, put vetch by the basket. The bottom line is, and this is where we're gonna note a contradiction. If the cow is working with truma in maisras, so we don't want the cow to eat the truma and maisras, therefore you're allowed to muzzle the cow. Eino oivim mishra bal tachsim. Comes along the brisa, that was the first brisa. Comes along brisa number 2 and says like this: Ruminhu, I'll ask you a question. Horais hamaraksois betvua eino oivim mishra bal tachsim. V'hadoshois betruma maiser. And this is the key. V'hadoshis b'truma meiser eiver mishum bal tachsim. If it's threshing truma meiser, you're not allowed to muzzle the animal. Hey, you just told me in the first price that you are allowed to muzzle an animal when it's working with trumas and meisers. So that is the contradiction. Now that just to finish off the brisa says, the goy hadosh b'parosoi shel Yisrael. A goy borrows the cow of a Jew to thresh his own tuah. So can the goy and the Jew says, Mr. Goy, you can thresh and you can muzzle the animal. You don't violate mishum bal tachsim because the goy is threshing his own wheat. Yisrael adosh beparasha shagoy, but if it's the opposite, a Jew that's threshing with a cow belonging to a goy, but it's the Jew's food, even mishum bal tachsim, he's not allowed to muzzle the animal, even though it's a goy's animal. Anyway, but the point there is, we said before that you're allowed to muzzle your animal when it's working with Truman Meiser, and in this price it says you're not allowed to muzzle the animal. Kasha truma, kasha maisa. We have a stira. And it says the Gemara, Bishlama truma loy kasha. I don't have a stira between truma and truma because kan betruma. By regular truma, you're right. You're allowed to muzzle the animal. Kan, but the second brisa that says you're not allowed to muzzle the animal, it's talking about bigidule truma. It's not truma, real truma. It's actually truma once removed. You had truma, you planted it in the ground. Now the seed rotted and something grew out. So that midrabanan, that is considered truma, but midoraisa, that's nothing. The seed rotted, it becomes a brand new wheat. So it's really midrabanan. It's midrabanan truma, but midoraisa, it's really like regular food, regular wheat. And there would be an isser of muzzling the animal when it's working with gedule truma. And that's what the second brisa is referring to. So that answers truma and truma. But el amaisa kasha. But the question still remains: how do you resolve? One brisa says that when an animal is working with the first brisa says when an animal is working with meiser, you're allowed to muzzle it, and the second brisa says you're not allowed to muzzle it. So kasha isn't that difficult. Answers the Gemara. I'm going to say maisa nami like kasha. That meiser, I'll answer the same teretz that you answered by truma. Kan b'maisa. Regular meiser, you're allowed to muzzle the animal. Kan b'gidule meiser. The outgrowth of meiser. In other words, you planted meiser rishon, and you took the wheat of meiser rishon, and somehow you planted it, and whatever grows out is not really meiser anymore. It's really chulim. And therefore, but midrabanan, maybe it's considered meiser. But there would be, because it's chulin, therefore there would be an isser of muzzling your animal when it's working with gidule meiser. So the Gemara says, wait a second, that's not a good teretz. Bishlama gidule truma. I understand something that grows from truma is really truma b'drabana, and therefore the Bryce has to tell you that there's still an isser of loisachsim if it works with. You're not allowed to muzzle an animal when it's working with gedule truma, because even though you're calling it truma, but it's only truma d'rabbanan. Ela gedule meiser chilin, who regular outgrowth of meiser is really not meiser, it's chulin. So it's regular chulin. So of course there's an isser. There's no novelty to tell me, oh, there's an isser of loisachsim. It's regular chulin. And therefore, of course, there's an isser of loisachsim. So the Brisa doesn't have to tell you that. The Tanah, we learned in the Mishnah, gedule tavel, gedule meiser sheni chulin. Anything that comes out of meiser sheni or any meisers is considered chulin. So how do you resolve the meiser answer? Ella says the Gemara loikasha, it's not difficult. Haba meiser rishon, haba meiser sheni. By meiser rishon, you're right. If an animal is working with meiser rishon, then it is there's no you're allowed to muzzle the animal. But when it's working with meiser sheni, which is really any Jew can eat meiser sheni. Only in meiser sheni is for everybody to eat in Jerusalem. So there, it's like regular chulin according to this teretz, and therefore there would be an isser for the animal to be muzzled when it's working with meiser sheni. So that is an answer regarding meiser. The iba is same. If you want, I can tell you hava meiser sheni. Both prices are talking about meiser sheni. Like kasha, it's not difficult. Ha Rav Meir, the Brisa says that you're allowed to muzzle an animal holds that Meiser Sheni is really not yours, even though you can eat it in Jerusalem, but it's not really yours. It's Mammon Gavoya, it's holy money, and therefore it's not really dishay, not your threshing, not your food, and because of that, there would be no Isser to muzzle the animal. Ha, Rabbi Yehuda. But the price that says that there would be an Isser to muzzle your animal goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds Meiser Sheni is really plain money. It's like yours, and if it's yours, then there would be an Isser to muzzle the animal. And the Gemara explains, the brisa that says you're allowed to muzzle is talking about, according to Rameir, that holds Meiser Sheni, it belongs to heaven money. And because of that, Rameir holds you can't be Mekadesh a woman with that money, with Meiser Sheni, because it's not really your money. God just gives you permission to eat it in Jerusalem. Aha, Rabbi Hudi, the one that says there is an Isser of Loy Sachsaim, holds that the Oma Meiser Sheni Momin Hedid he holds that Meiser Sheni is plain money. So that's like regular, any money that you have, anything that you own, any wheat that you have, where there would be an Isser to muzzle your animal. Now, says the Gemara, Hey Chidami, how is it possible to have mice give off Meiseris when you're up to the threshing part? Usually you give off Meiseris and Truma after threshing. So we spoke this out. Kigoin shegdimu b'shabon. Right away, the Kohen showed up and the Levi showed up while they were in stalks before you did the threshing, and you decided to give Truma Samaisa at that point. It's not usual to do that, but you did it anyway. Says the Gemara. So there is an Isser, according to Rabbi Yehuda, to muzzle an animal while it's working with Meiser Sheni. In other words, you have to allow the animal to thresh and be able to eat from the Meiser Sheni produce. But wait a second, how is that possible? But when the animal's going to eat, it's eating outside Jerusalem. Doesn't Meiser Sheni have to be eaten in Jerusalem? Doesn't Meiser Sheni have to be eaten within the walls? And says the Gemara, Kagoin, the Bryce is talking about, you're right, that you brought the Meiser Sheni into Jerusalem, and that's where it's threshing. And because of that, it was allowed to eat the truma there, the Meiser Sheni there. You threshed it inside the walls, inside the suburbs of Jerusalem. Iba is saying, if you want, I can tell you, like kasha is not difficult. Again, kamba Meiser Vadai, kamba Meiser Demai. That it's talking about Meiser Vadai or Meiser Demai. If it's for sure Meiser Rishon, you're allowed to muzzle the animal. If it's Meiser Demai, which is Meiser Rabbanan, that you give off Meiser from purchases that you buy from an Amarit, so it's not really chayiv in the Meiseris. There it has a din of like regular chulim where there would be an isser of muzzling your animal. So the Gemara says, now that you answered this teretz, Truma namele kasha, I don't have a difficulty in Truma. Kam betrumas vadai, kam betrumas demai. By trumas vadai, if it's for sure Truma, midoraisa, you're allowed to muzzle the animal. If it's Truma demai, you're giving off Truma masafik, then you're not allowed, you're not allowed to muzzle the animal. So the Gemara says, what does it mean Trumas demai? Bishlama meiser demai ika. There's a concept called giving meiser from demai. There's no such a thing of truma d'rabbanan. Once you give it to because the whole point of the Mai was if you buy from an Amoritz and you're not sure if the Amoritz gave off Trumas Amaisris, so you have to give off Trumas Amaisris. But Truma, we always assume that the Amoritz gave. All you have to do is give off Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni, make a Kriya Shem, and that's it. So that's what time we learned in the Brisa. Afapi who bitter savida because ultimately if you shall b'chol gvus of rosh leim afrishin elam truma gedol bavad that Yochanan and Kohen Gadol made that gezerah that when you buy from an Amoritz you don't have to give off truma gedola but you have to give off meisers because you're never sure if he really gave off meisers. So how is that possible that you have truma demai? There's no such a thing of truma demai. Elaloi kasha, that's not true. Kam betrumas ma'isa vadai, kam betrumas ma'isa demai. When you're dealing, even a Levi that has ma'isa rishon, if he gives off ma'isa rishon, if he gives off truma, that's called regular truma. He gives 10% of what he received as ma'isa rishon. That there's no isser to muzzle the animal. Kam betrumas ma'isa demai. When the Levi received ma'isa rishon, right, Meiser Rishon, or if he didn't receive it, but the owner who bought the Tvua from the Amaretz separated Meiser, he also has to separate Trumas Meiser, not regular Truma, but Trumas Meiser. That's Truma D'Rabbanan, that if the animal is working with Trumas Meiser Demai, then there would be an Isser to muzzle the animal. So bottom line, Gemara answered a couple of Terutzim, three Terutzim to answer a Meiser Rishon, to answer the Meiser problem, and two Terutzim on Truma to answer the Truma problem. Let's just move on to a new topic. The new topic begins like this. Again, we're dealing, the Gemara is discussing the Isser of muzzling an animal. Let's say if you see that the animal has diarrhea and it's not good for the animal to eat, are you allowed to muzzle the animal? It's a good question. They asked from Rasheshis. If the animal was eating, if the animal would eat from the thing that it's threshing, and it would have diarrhea, Mahu, what would be the din? Are you allowed to muzzle such an animal? Mishum demala, the whole point of the Torah telling us you're not supposed to muzzle an animal because it's beneficial for the animal to eat while it's working. In this case, not good for the animal to eat because if it's going to eat, it's going to have diarrhea. So maybe there would be no isser to muzzle the animal. The bottom line is it's watching its threshing and it gets pain. The animal has internal pain, stress that it can't eat. And so who cares if it has diarrhea? Well, chazia, but the animal still sees that it's threshing and it's going to be in pain. The question is, are you allowed to muzzle this animal or not? We actually learned that Shimon ben Yochai says, Mevi kashinim v'toilosha kashinim yafis lo menakol. Shimon ben Yochai says, you always do what you think you do what's best for the animal. You do what's best for the animal, and therefore you have to have common sense. If it's best interest for the animal to be muzzled, because if it eats it, it's going to get stomach problems, then you're allowed to muzzle that animal. Shma Mina from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, Mishum demal lahu. You always look at what's good for the animal. Shma Mina, that's proof positive that you're allowed to muzzle the animal if it's bad for the animal to eat. So the Gemara asks a question. A question. Mahu shiyoyma odom lagoy. We know you're not allowed to tell a guy to turn out a light on Shabbos, right? Because that's aser. Amira la'akim. What happens? Can I tell a guy, chasoim parasi v'dushba? You can muzzle my animal and thresh with it. You actually telling the let's say the guy is borrowing your animal or renting your animal. You tell him you can muzzle it and have it thresh your wheat. Can you do that? Tell that to guy. Do you say ki amirul goy shvus? When is it an avera to tell a guy to do an avera? Hanimili in Shabbos. That only in regards to Shabbos. You can't tell a guy to cook for you, turn on a light. This is skila because Shabbos has a very strict isser skila. Ava chasima the isser lav. Since chasima is only an isser of a lav, it's only you get a malchus. There is no isser to tell the guy. Or maybe there is no difference. Maybe there's an isser to tell a guy to muzzle an animal, to muzzle your animal. Toshima, come in here. Goy hadash beparasa she Yisrael. If the guy is threshing with the cow of the Jew, look at the language. The Jew will not get an avera if the guy muzzles the animal. So we can imply. What can we imply from this? We can apply mevahu delayava. You don't get an avera if the Jew will not get avera ha'isura ikka, but there will be an isser, a prohibition from actually telling the guy to muzzle the animal. You may not get malchus, but you probably get an isser. Answers the Gemara, bedinhu, really the isuri nami lekya. Really, there is no isser. The Aidi, the Tanu, Sefer Yisrael, Dashba Rosh Goy, Oiver, Tanaresha ain't Oiver. Since the language of the Brisa had to use Oiver, because if the Jew is using the cow of the Goy, you have to use the word Oiver. So the ratio, when it says Goy, Dashba Rosh Yisrael, uses the word ain't Oiver. But really, the Brisa can mean there is no Isser. There is no Isser of telling the guy to muzzle my animal if you're threshing with your Tvua. Tashma, come in here. They sent the question to the father of Shmuel. And now, what was the question? Haloin Tori, we go to Amid Beis. Haloin Tori, the Ganve Amai, Maganchen Masain. We have nice neighbors. They know that we use our cows, our oxen. So our oxen from for plowing. So what they do is they pretend they steal the animal overnight and they castrate the animal, right? And then return it to us. And we know that we would like that because now the animal is a stronger animal because it's not going to have relations with another animal, with a female animal. So they steal it, do us a favor, and they know we like that to be done, but we can't tell them to do it. But Maho, can a Jew benefit from such an animal? If the guy did such a thing to your animal, are you allowed to keep that animal? You're not allowed to be castrate an animal. So Rav Sheshes answered, Harame Sabid. This is a trickery. It's almost as if you're telling the guy to do it. Arume alayo, they're making a trick. The Izdaben, you should sell it right away. So what you see from here is that you see if you tell a guy to do something that you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to benefit from that. That's what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara is now assuming that you're not allowed to tell a guy to muzzle the animal when it's working, when it's threshing wheat. Answers the Gemara, no. Amar Papa said the reason why you had to sell it over there is not because the Jew told. It's almost as if the Jew told the guy to castrate my animal, and the guy didn't really do an avera because there's no isser of a guy to castrate an animal. That's not true. B'nei Rav Amaravi Savle Rab Chitcha. These people who asked the question held like Rab Chitcha, the Amar who said B'nei Noach Mitzuvin al Asiris. A guy is not allowed, himself is not allowed to castrate an animal. By the Jew allowing his animal to be stolen, quote unquote, then he's allowing the guy to castrate his animal and do a big avera of castrating an animal, seirus an animal. And a Jew is oiver lifnei evil leisitin michshol. So therefore, that's the problem over here. So that's why he said, Abu Dishmuel said, but there's definitely no isser for a guy to muzzle his own animal. So the question still remains, can the guy muzzle the Jew's animal if he's working with his own tvuah? So, but just to finish off what we're discussing, Sava Rava Lamema, Yamachul Shchita. Rava said that when I think Rav Sheshes said, when I think it's Rav Sheshes, right? Ravu de Shmuel, sorry, when the Ravu de Shmuel said you have to sell it, he meant you sell it on the lowest possible way. Sell it to that for shchita, that it could only be slaughtered. When you sell it on below market value. Abaye said, now dayan shekanasta aleim bechira. It's enough that Ravu de Shmuel said that it has to be sold, but they really could sell it for a higher price. They could sell it for an ox that is used for plowing. They don't have to make a fire sale for that. Now, who do they have to sell it to? Pshita b'noi gadol ki achadami. If they sell it to their older son, that's like selling it to a stranger. B'noi katan can they sell it to the young son who's under Metzia? Ravacha aser, Ravashi shari. Ravacha said it's not, and Ravashi said it's permitted. Says the Gemara, Maremo Marzitra, v'amri la hani trei chasidim mechalfei hadodi. Maremo and Marzitra had goyish friends, and they wanted to do a favor for Marema and Marzitra, so they stole their animals at night and castrated the animals, and then returned it the next day to Marema and Marzitra. So Marema and Marzitra did not want to benefit from those animals. So what they did was they exchanged, each one who had the same problem with the guy, exchanged the animals with each other. Instead of selling it to each other, they exchanged the animals with each other. Now the Gemara asks just another two more questions regarding, again, you're not allowed to thresh, you're not allowed to muzzle an animal. Let's say, Rami Bachama said, if you put a stick in its mouth, now it can't, it's almost like muzzling. Is that a problem? And says Gemara, if you put it into its mouth, that's like you muzzle the animal. Who cares if you muzzle with a mask or muzzle with putting a big bone in its mouth? That's stopping the animal from eating. And says the Gemara, no. Elo, the question was, Yashav la kaitz b'fiyah. Let's say a stick went into its mouth. You didn't put it there, and now it's threshing your grain. Mao, do you have to pull out that bone in its mouth? Maybe you could leave it there. Let's say here, let's say while it's threshing, a lion started to, pay a visit and started watching it from the outside. So because it's nervous about the lion, it's not going to eat while it's threshing. Maho, do you have to chase away the lion? Herbert's law, if you cause it to crouch onto Herbert's law, again, Hirbitz's law. So the Gemara says no. If you put the lion there, that's preventing. That's muzzling the animal. If you put the lion there, the question is that our lion came by itself. So do you have to chase it away? Let's say you put the animal's kid on the outside. So now it doesn't want to eat while it's threshing because it's looking at its own child. Let's say the animal was thirsty for water. Mahu, what would be the din? What would be the din from all these cases? Or paras lo ketavle al gabidisha. You didn't put anything in its mouth, but what you did was over the wheat you put a piece of leather, and now the animal, even if it tries to get to the wheat, it can't get to wheat because the leather is a block from it eating. Is that a problem? So the Gemara says, I'm going to answer you one of them, the last question. You're not allowed to, maybe you're not allowed to put that piece of leather there. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Wait, maybe you are allowed to. The Tanya learned in the Brisa. The owner of the cow, who's renting his cow out, is allowed to starve his cow, so that when the cow is threshing for somebody else, it'll eat a lot. So the owner of the cow is allowed to starve his cow so he'll eat. But and the owner is allowed to put some bundles of grain on top of the threshing wheat, so that the animal will not eat from the threshing a lot. So we see you're allowed to block the animal from eating by putting something over the produce that it's the wheat that it's threshing. Like you say, you're allowed to undo a pile to block the animal from eating. And says the Gemara, that's a big difference. Shana Hossam, there by the Pkia Oimer, the Ka'achle, it eats. It doesn't eat a lot, but it eats. It'll find something, a break in the pile, and get past it and start eating the wheat. But here you're putting a piece of leather right over the grain, right over the grain. That is a problem because it can't eat at all. This will stop. What it means is you feeding the animal this bundle of grain before, so that it doesn't eat a lot from the threshing, but not that you're blocking the animal from eating from the threshing. It's just full, and that's why it's not eating from the threshing. But what about actually putting a ketavlaya on Gaba Yedisha, putting a piece of leather over the threshing? Perhaps that's not permitted. Okay, we're going to stop over here by the Boya Minei.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Hey, we'll keep dealing with threshing.